Welcome to Catholic Talk. I'm joined today by Ann Widdecombe. Very happy to have her here. Ann Widdecombe is a former Conservative politician, a member of Parliament for the Conservative Party most of her political career. And then at the end, she was also in the Brexit Party. She's also done many other things, many television appearances, not just political, but also entertainment, like Strictly Come Dancing. But today we're going to talk about her faith, her Catholic faith. And I want to begin by asking you, Anne, how you came into the Catholic faith, because I know you weren't raised as a Catholic. I wanted to ask you if you were raised in, because I know you were an Anglican before. Were you raised in that faith though, from the early years?
Very much so. I was a very, very practicing Anglican family. My uncle was a vicar, my brother was a vicar, my younger nephew now is a vicar. Sometimes I think that the Widdecombe's existed to breed vicars for the Church of England. So it was a very, very practicing Anglican family. It wasn't a superficial one. But my mother's grandfather had been a Catholic. And when my mother's father, my grandfather, had been a Catholic. And when he was dying, it was Catholic nuns who looked after him. And so my mother always had an enormous respect for the nuns, but it was an age difficult to recall now, and which really only people of my generation will be able to recall, when there was a massive distrust between Protestantism and Catholicism. For example, when I was at a Catholic school, to which I was sent when I was 11, when I was at a Catholic school, the Protestants had to go to Mass on the Sunday with the Catholics. We were not allowed to go out to our own church. It was very, very intolerant. And I left that school at the age of 18, knowing a lot about Catholicism, but not remotely sympathetic to it. I then carried on with the Evangelical Christian Unions at the two universities I went to, first Birmingham and then Oxford. And then after that, I went through a period of agnosticism. And I've always said my big mistake when I came back from that was not to become a Catholic there and then, but my Anglican roots were hugely strong. But I was becoming very, very disillusioned with the Anglican Church, very. It always seemed to sacrifice creed to compromise, faith to fashion. We even had a situation in which the fourth most senior bishop, the then Bishop of Durham, questioned articles of creed. And remained the fourth most senior bishop in the Church of England. And it seemed to me that the Church of England was just becoming weaker and weaker and was following rather than leading. And whatever the public conversation was, it would come in on that and it would take the, if you like, the secular point of view. So I was already carrying a very large bundle of straw when the synod debated the ordination of women. And it didn't debate that on the basis of, is this theologically acceptable? Should this happen? It debated it on the basis that if we don't do this, we will be out of step with the modern world. Now, that was never my view of what the Church's mission was. It wasn't to keep in step with the modern world, it was to teach the gospel. And so at that point, at the point where the Church of England finally did decide to ordain women on this very, very untheological basis, I left. Now, I didn't immediately become a Catholic. I think everybody thinks I went overnight from being an Anglican to being a Catholic. I didn't. I took 4 months of talks with a priest before I was satisfied that I could actually say what every person has to say when they're received into the church. The bar is much higher for us than it is for any cradle Catholic. We have to say at the point of reception, individually say that we believe that what the church teaches is revealed truth. And so if you've got any reservation about any doctrine at all, if you're a cradle Catholic, you can develop reservations about half the canon. But if you're actually a convert, you must have no reservations at all. And that is a very, very tough position to reach. So it took me, and when I say 4 months, that doesn't sound very much, but it was intensive. I was seeing a priest several times a week.
Yeah, absolutely. We do often find that people who have joined the Catholic Church are not very liberal, should you say? Like the reason they joined is because they knew what they were joining, whereas you'll get some cradle Catholics, as you said, who they were raised in it, and then they go, oh well, I disagree with this and I disagree with that. You're not the only person to go from Anglicanism to Catholicism. There's been other clergy from the Anglican Church, and most recently it was quite a prominent figure, Michael Nazir Ali, who was
and he didn't even come from the Anglo-Catholic wing. He came from, if anything, the evangelical wings. I mean, it was a huge leap.
Even more surprising, and he was, I think it said somewhere that he was actually at one point considered to be the favorite to be the Archbishop of Canterbury. So that's like a very prominent position as well in the Anglican Church. But he gave a similar reason to what you gave, maybe not in terms exactly similar, because yours was back in the early 90s, whereas his was now. But he said that he accused the Church of England of jumping onto every faddish bandwagon about identity politics, cultural corrections, and mea culpas about Britain's imperial past. So he was like, again, feeling like they were just trying to do everything to satisfy the society. And do you think that's the most common reason people leave the Anglican Church, because they just feel like they don't see any real leadership? They feel like the Anglican Church, as you did, just kind of bows down to everything that society wants?
I think always the start of anybody's journey towards Catholicism is frustration with the Anglican Church. I mean, you just gradually get more and more frustrated. I mean, Christ defied the society of his day. You know, he did absolutely everything. He feasted with publicans and sinners, and they called him a glutton and a winebibber. His disciples broke the Sabbath and the rules that then prevailed when they went and ate corn. Wherever you look, you know, he rushed through the temple with a whip, turning over the merchants' tables and things. He was actually defying the society of the day. He was standing up to it. He was saying, this is right, that's wrong. The Anglican Church does not do that. It goes with the society of the day, and doesn't really appear to refer to anything that would anchor it. And the one thing about Catholicism is it was summed up in Veritatis Splendor, which was John Paul II's encyclical, which came out just after I joined the Catholic Church, but as I always smile at the time, summed up my reasons for joining it, which is that something doesn't have to be popular to be right. Something can be popular and very wrong, or deeply unpopular and completely right. And that is the position of the Catholic Church. It knows what it teaches, it sticks by it. And the Anglicans take the other view, which is that popularity and the prevailing mores are the determining factors.
Truths seem to change very often outside of the Christian Church, or at least the Catholic Church, whereas the Catholic Church kind of says this is the truth, and that stays.
That's it. It's an eternal verity. Yeah. I mean, if something is true yesterday, it must be true today. Now, there are rules and there are conventions which can change. For example, you know, whether you wear a hat in church, you know, that's obviously a rule, that's not a doctrine. But the solid doctrines of the church do not change and cannot change, because if they are true now, then they're going to be true tomorrow.
Indeed. Now, I was reading something, I'll confirm with you if this is true. In 2010, you had to turn down being Britain's ambassador to the Holy See, and it's because you had a problem with a detached retina. Is that true?
Yes. Yes, that's completely true. I'd retired. Obviously, I retired in 2010. And a few weeks later, David Cameron rang me up, and I was driving on a motorway at the time. And he offered me the position of ambassador to the Vatican. I thought, I don't believe this. And I wasn't familiar with David Cameron's cadences on a telephone, because we'd never had a telephone conversation before. And I would know if I was being hoaxed about William Hague, say, but I thought, I'm not sure this is true. David Cameron was asking me to go to the Vatican. You know, Cameron can't stand me. So I said to him, you're not David Cameron. Of course, he was completely taken aback. And I said, I'll pull into a motorway services station. I'll phone number 10. And I phoned number 10 fully expecting to find that it was a hoax, only for the person who answered the phone to say, oh, yes, the Prime Minister's waiting for your call. So it's true, yeah. I was offered the embassy to the Vatican. I could not take it. I had a detached retina not very long afterwards. And it was made very clear to me that because it could always redetach, then I needed to be within easy reach of Moorfields for some time. Although they have very good hospitals in Italy, it wasn't a decision against Italian medicine, but I thought if I'm dealing with something as important as my own sight, I need to deal with it in English, not in a language I don't speak. So after a lot of umming and ahhing, and it did take me a long time to make my mind up, I said no.
Okay, so let's move on to some kind of very Catholic related things. Before I go on to just a couple of things that have happened in the news, maybe not very recently, but fairly recently. We find that with the Catholic Church, generally the Catholic Church has always been seen as controversial in the secular world and secular media. But I think, at least from where I can remember, this is the third Pope in my lifetime. I suppose it's the third Pope in your Catholic lifetime.
Yes, my Catholic lifetime.
Yes, because I know there were some popes around before that. This seems to be like the first Pope that seems to be causing a lot of controversy in the Catholic world itself. There's very varying opinions on the Pope. Some people really defend him a lot and like him. Other people seem to not like him a lot and always attack him. Then there's those in the middle who kind of feel like, well, he's fine, but occasionally he'll say something that's a bit ambiguous. What are your thoughts on our current Pope?
Well, I think the current Pope is very, very good at PR. So the whole world thinks he's changing things and saying something different, whereas in fact, nothing's changed. Absolutely nothing's changed. And I say this sometimes to people who say, well, the Pope is reforming the church. I say, oh, yes, what's changed? Tell me what's changed. Oh, well, he's more tolerant towards gay people. I said the church has always been tolerant towards gay people, but we've got a very clear teaching on gay marriage. What's changed? And actually, if you press hard in there, he does a very good PR job, whereas Benedict actually made big changes. I mean, Benedict Dashit was in office about 5 minutes and suddenly limbo had gone from the canon. I mean, Benedict made really big changes, but because his PR was so utterly conservative, God's Rottweiler and all the rest of it, nobody actually realized what he was doing. So I think it's a question, I meet it all the time in politics. The Conservative Party cannot reform the NHS, the Labour Party could. Because it's a question of image and what you're actually doing. And they're often in conflict with each other. And that is because we have a press and a media that likes image.
Yeah, I think that's a very good...
So you asked me what I thought about that. I actually think I would prefer him to take a very firm line because it results in less muddle. Yeah. Nothing's changed, but there's a muddle over whether it has. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. As you were saying, it is true. He doesn't seem to change doctrine or anything, but it just every time, or not every time, but sometimes when he says something, it gives the media an opportunity, certainly the secular media, to say, oh, the Pope is now saying this is fine. And then obviously, as you said, if we look into it, we say, no, he didn't say that, but...
He didn't say that at all. No, I know. There've been a couple of instances of that when I've been rung up. And I've said, and as it happens, I've seen what he said and I've got it in front of me. And I've said, no, he did not say that. This is what he actually said. And then there's a rather disappointed sort of reaction on the other end of the line. But every time he opens his mouth, because his PR is very good and because he is very careful not to give offence and not to sound too strident, everybody thinks he's saying something which he isn't.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that was recently ruled was that dioceses would be able to decide whether the Latin Mass should take place in their diocese. Are you a Latin Mass goer yourself, or do you prefer to go to the Novus Order?
Let me make a distinction. I'm very much in favour of the Mass in Latin, which isn't quite what you've just asked, but I'll go into that. I'm very much in favour of the Mass in Latin. I now get very frustrated when I travel and I find a Catholic church on a Sunday and it's all in a language which I can't understand. And every so often I hear Gloria in excelsis Deo. I think, oh, that's where we are. I have no idea where we are in the Mass. And so I very much would appreciate a return to a universal language. Having said that, I do not like the Tridentine Rite, the priest with his back to the people. I went to one a few years ago. I did it at the request of the Latin Mass Society, who wanted me to write about it, and they're probably now very sorry that they ever asked me to write about it, because I didn't take the communion because I didn't feel I'd participated in the mass. I mean, the priest was there, his back was to me. I didn't feel I was part of it. That is the Catholicism I remember pre-Vatican II from when I was at school, and probably goes a long way to explain why I never found it attractive. But the universality of the church's language used to be one of its big strengths. And I mean, it isn't a question that you couldn't understand what was being said because you had the English translation down the right-hand side. And so you knew exactly what you were saying. And you know, this argument that, oh, well, people who didn't read Latin and can't understand Latin, they won't know what they're saying. Well, they can follow down the right-hand side. But you go into a foreign church on a Sunday and you are just completely helpless. They might as well, you know, be speaking Martian.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you're in favour of Mass being in Latin, but you don't like the structure that it had during the Latin Mass.
I don't like it, no.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that was, because obviously this was one of these decisions that got a lot of people talking, particularly people who really like going to the Latin Mass, it got them talking and again making theories about, oh, the Pope hates us and things like this. And do you think that was a wise decision from the Pope to do that?
I mean, I think in effect it's always really been down to the diocese. It's either encouraged or it's not. I mean, I am within striking distance of both the Latin Mass and ordinary Masses on a Sunday. And I would like pretty well everybody to have that choice because I don't see a problem with doing two Masses. I mean, one the Latin rite and the other, you know, in the vernacular and the ordinary rite. So I don't see a problem with offering people a choice. And what I don't want is any bishop saying you either must or you mustn't have the Latin Mass. I think the choice should be there. I don't have a problem with people who love the Tridentine rite and like all that. Don't have a problem with them having that. Why shouldn't they have that? If that's where they get their spiritual sustenance, why not? What's the problem?